Zora Neale Hurston was a famous Harlem Renaissance writer who specialized in folklore and anthropological study. Born in Notasulga, Alabama in 1891, Hurston and her family moved to the all-black community of Eatonville, Florida when she was 3 years old. Hurston's father, a Baptist preacher, was not especially supportive of his family. Rather, Hurston's mother, Lucy, was committed to supporting her 8 children. When Lucy died, Hurston's father immediately remarried, and Hurston was sent to boarding school in Jacksonville, Florida. With her sudden move to Jacksonville, Hurston confronted overt racism for the first time. She came to relish her childhood days in Eatonville, a community where African Americans could live in peace, independent of white society. Hurston's appreciation for Eatonville is reflected in the essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me. In 1901, Hurston enrolled at Howard University, the premier all-black university of the time. Hurston studied under Alain Locke, the philosophical architect of the Harlem Renaissance. Locke influenced many writers with his philosophical idea of the new Negro, based on black self-confidence and political awareness. Hurston then received a scholarship to study at Barnard College, part of Columbia University. As the sole black student, she felt isolated. These feelings can be directly attributed to the line, "I feel most colored when I am thrown against a sharp white background," from How It Feels to Be Colored Me. While in New York, Hurston interacted with other famed Harlem Renaissance writers, including Langston Hughes and Wallace Thurmond. Several of these writers started the African American literary magazine Fire with the goal of expressing the attitudes of a younger African American generation. Hurston clashed with her contemporaries. She disliked Langston Hughes's idea that black writers should focus on how blacks were portrayed to white readers. Hurston believed characters should be a mix of positive and negative traits. The wishes of her white financial supporter, Charlotte Osgood Mason, made this vision difficult to achieve. Hurston studied anthropology at Barnard along with famed anthropologist Franz Boas. His interest in folklore sparked Hurston's own fascination. She later traveled to the American South, Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, and Honduras, where she gathered inspiration for many of her works, such as Their Eyes Were Watching God. Hurston's use of idiomatic speech, as seen in The Gilded Sixbits, and incorporation of folklore were particularly controversial. Many of her contemporaries felt that her stylistic choices were too racist and that her work was not of value because it did not explicitly engage the political issues of the time. Unfortunately, the negative critical reception Hurston received eventually forced her into obscurity. She died in a welfare home in 1960. In 1973, famed novelist Alice Walker found an unmarked grave in the area where Hurston was buried and marked it as hers. Alice Walker's appreciation for Hurston's work sparked a renewed interest amongst the general population. Today, many critics praise Hurston's stylistic choice to use idiomatic speech and images of folklore. This passage is from Norton, page 943, in How It Feels to Be Colored Me. I feel like a brown bag of miscellany propped against a wall in company with other bags, white, red, and yellow. Pour out the contents, and there is discovered a jumble of small things priceless and worthless. A first water diamond, an empty spool, bits of broken glass, lengths of string, a key to a door long since crumbled away, a rusty knife blade, old shoes saved for a road that never was and never will be, a nail bent under the weight of things too heavy for any nail, a dried flower too still little fragrant. In your hand is the brown bag. On the ground before you is the jumble it held. So much like the jumble in the bags, could they be emptied, that all might be dumped in a single heap and the bags refilled without altering the content of any greatly. A bit of colored glass more or less would not matter. Perhaps that is how the great stuffer of bags filled them in the first place. Who knows? The use of a brown bag as a simile is noteworthy. Hurston is comparing herself to a simple, ordinary object. She paradoxically describes her insides as both priceless and worthless. Hurston is perhaps suggesting that despite her ordinary exterior, inside she is a unique contradiction. The other colored bags bring to mind other human races. By representing each race as a colored bag, Hurston is reducing the importance of physical appearance. This reduction highlights the superficiality of the exterior. These key and old shoe images conjure feelings of loss and regret. Hurston is possibly lamenting the opportunities she missed due to her race. In both instances, the tool is present, but the opportunity to use the tool never presents itself. The nail immediately brings thoughts of oppression to mind. Hurston points to the fact that many African Americans, she included, have often been forced to bear the brunt of America's work without seeing any kind of reimbursement. The phrase, "in your hand," brings a second person into the dialogue. The reader must wonder who is controlling Hurston. Looking at Hurston's life, one possible answer is upper-class white society and white male-dominated government. The fact that the bags are filled without altering the content of any greatly presents a message. The shuffling and redistribution of the bag's contents suggests that African Americans can be given more rights without causing tremendous upheaval to society as a whole. The great stuffer of bags is potentially a metaphor for God. God's distribution of physical and mental traits is as random as the distribution of the bag's contents. Therefore, physical appearance should be of little consequence and should not be used to judge which jumble of contents one deserves in one's life.